thought my sister was just quiet and boring, until I opened her laptop and uncovered her secret online life. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about her.
Hey everyone, real quick, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It's free, takes a second, and helps us keep making the content you love. Thanks. Now let's dive in.
If you asked anyone who knew my sister Emily, they'd describe her as quiet, polite, and maybe even a little boring. She worked a regular 9 to 5 job at a cozy little bookstore downtown, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, and spent most of her evenings curled up on the couch, reading thick fantasy novels or binge-watching old rom-coms on Netflix while sipping chamomile tea. She wore oversized cardigans, baked scones on Sunday mornings, and never missed sending birthday cards to distant relatives. To everyone, including me, she was the definition of wholesome and predictable, the kind of person who'd rather knit scarves for stray cats than get involved in anything remotely dramatic or controversial. But then little things started to feel off. It was subtle at first. I'd hear muffled laughter from her room late at night, sometimes even past midnight. At first, I figured she was watching a comedy show or texting with someone, maybe a new guy she hadn't told me about. No big deal. But then it became more frequent. Her door, which had always been slightly ajar when she was home, started staying firmly closed, locked even during the day. Then there was her laptop. Once a communal fixture on the kitchen table used casually for online shopping and recipe searches, it was suddenly never out of her sight. She carried it from room to room like a lifeline. And it was always closed, always password protected. She even stopped letting me borrow it, which was unusual, especially since she had always been so generous with her things. One afternoon, I overheard her through the thin hallway wall. She was talking to someone online, clearly on voice chat, but there was something strange about her tone. It wasn't her usual sweet, reserved voice. It was confident, even bold. She sounded like someone else entirely, someone flirty, commanding, like she was playing a role in a movie. When I knocked, she stopped mid-sentence, said a quick goodbye, and opened the door with that all-too-innocent smile. I brushed it off. Everyone has a private side, right? Maybe she was just exploring a new relationship or trying out some weird online improv group. It wasn't my business. I told myself that over and over, but curiosity has a way of digging under your skin and refusing to let go. And the more I told myself to let it go, the more obsessed I became with figuring out what she was hiding. The tipping point came one quiet Thursday evening. Emily had gone out to pick up groceries, leaving her laptop charging in the living room, something she hadn't done in weeks. I wasn't even thinking about snooping. I just passed by and glanced at the screen as it lit up. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. A single browser window was open, and the tab read, Velvet Haven Forum, Midnight Threads. I hesitated. My heart started racing. I stared at the glowing screen, debating whether to respect her privacy or give in to the gnawing curiosity that had been building inside me for weeks. I don't know what possessed me, but I clicked. That was the moment everything began to unravel, and I would never look at my sister the same way again. The moment the Velvet Haven Forum loaded, I was greeted by a sleek, dark interface bathed in shades of midnight blue and deep violet. The layout was minimalistic but elegant, with softly glowing text and an almost theatrical ambiance. Thread titles jumped out at me with eerie flair. Whispers in the Dark, Confession Booth, Midnight Masquerade, and dozens more with similarly enigmatic names. It looked like some sort of underground online community, perhaps for writing, immersive role-playing, or personal expression, but the tone was unmistakably secretive and otherworldly. I clicked around cautiously, hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards and distant sound outside the window. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting Emily to burst through the door and catch me red-handed. My palms were clammy, my heart thundering in my chest, so loud it felt like it echoed in my ears. This wasn't just idle curiosity anymore. It was a plunge into a side of my sister I never imagined existed. I knew I was crossing a line, but I couldn't stop myself. Her username was impossible to miss. Moonlit Muse 87. It wasn't just present, it was everywhere. She was one of the most active users on the forum, in the top posters list, in dozens of threads, quoted by other members in glowing admiration. She had over 11,000 posts, a massive following, and a presence that dominated the space. People adored her. They referred to her in reverent tones, laughed at her quips, and eagerly awaited her replies. A few even called her Queen Muse, and from the way they interacted with her, it wasn't just flattery, it was devotion. I dove into her post expecting quirky writing prompts or harmless escapism, but her words stopped me cold. They were beautiful, rich, moody, poetic. She wrote short stories that felt like fever dreams, posted metaphor-laden reflections on self-identity, and waxed philosophical about the masks people wear online versus in real life. She talked about duality, the versions of ourselves we suppress, and how anonymity could unlock buried truths. Her prose was hauntingly good, honest, raw, and unexpectedly wise. I reread one paragraph 3 times just trying to process the depth. This was Emily? My sweet, cardigan-wrapped sister who once asked me if dragons were herbivores in real mythology? The same person who got nervous ordering at Starbucks? It didn't feel possible. But there it was, plain as day. She wasn't just hiding a hobby. She was living a second life. The more I read, the more the atmosphere shifted. After a while, I noticed certain posts referenced locked subforums. Members used coded language, phrases like the underworld, the mirror room, and red thread nights. Through a bit of careful clicking and tracing her post history, I uncovered a hidden section of the site. A private subforum she moderated called Velvet Underworld. The content there was different, bolder, darker. It wasn't overtly graphic or inappropriate, but it carried an edge, like stepping into a dream that was half fantasy, half confession. Threads ranged from anonymous storytelling and surreal therapy roleplays to shadowy philosophical discussions. One thread in particular, started by Emily herself, stood out. What mask do you wear when no one's watching? It was filled with responses from users sharing secret personas, inner conflicts, personal stories they swore they had never admitted aloud, not even to their partners or therapists. Some were humorous, others hauntingly vulnerable. And there she was again, moonlit Muse 87, at the center of it all. She wasn't just replying with surface-level platitudes. Her messages were insightful, precise, sometimes even unnervingly accurate in pinpointing a user's emotional struggle. She asked the kind of questions that dug under skin. Her replies were like therapy and performance art combined, part empathy, part mind game, part mentor. People clearly respected her, trusted her, opened up to her in ways I never thought possible online. It was as if she had created an entire alternate universe, one where she could shed every limitation of her real-life persona. In this world, she was powerful, magnetic, unapologetic. She carried herself like someone who had never known self-doubt. The confidence and presence she exuded online was almost unrecognizable compared to the Emily I lived with. I kept scrolling. Each post pulled me further down the rabbit hole. It was like discovering a locked diary, not just filled with secrets, but written in a language I was never meant to read. And I couldn't stop reading. I told myself I was protecting her, understanding her. But I think part of me was just entranced. Despite my unease, there was nothing overtly dangerous. No mention of illegal activity, no graphic content. It was all emotions, identities, confessions. Some uncomfortable, yes, but deeply human. Still, it felt like a sacred space, a hidden chamber of her life that had been sealed off from everyone, especially family. And I had just barged in. I was hooked. Every new discovery sent a fresh ripple of chills through me. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't have predicted, was that I hadn't even touched the deepest part of her world. The real truth, the one that would change everything, was still hidden just a few clicks away. I don't know what I expected to find when I kept digging, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Somewhere deep in the velvet underworld, buried beneath layers of cryptic thread titles, usernames soaked in metaphor and emotionally charged discussions, I stumbled upon a post Emily had written just a few days earlier. The thread was titled, "Behind the Mirror, When the Persona Becomes the Person." It wasn't flashy, no likes, no replies yet, just quietly sitting there, waiting to be read, like a forgotten letter tucked into the folds of a journal. I clicked. What opened in front of me wasn't just another roleplay starter or poetic musing. It was a confession, a manifesto, a slow unraveling of the Emily I thought I knew, typed out in paragraphs that felt like open wounds. The writing was long, raw, and unfiltered. There was no embellishment, no character to hide behind. It was her, unmasked. It was as if she had peeled herself open and poured every vulnerable thought onto the page with trembling fingers. She wrote about her invisibility in the real world, how she could walk into a room and barely make a ripple, how people remembered her as that nice girl, but never much more. She described how exhausting it felt to smile when she didn't want to laugh when she felt hollow inside. She said she'd mastered the art of being unnoticed, of shrinking herself to fit into everyone else's comfort. She confessed how lonely it felt to be surrounded by people who loved the version of her she pretended to be, and how tiring it was to keep pretending. She described the online world not as an escape, but as the only place where she could breathe. Velvet Haven wasn't just a community to her, it was a lifeline. Being Moonlit Muse 87 gave her something tangible: respect, admiration, and an identity she'd never found offline. She said that when she logged in, she didn't feel small, she felt real, she felt seen. She said she sometimes fantasized about deleting her real life entirely, walking away from the person everyone thought she was, and living only in that digital space where she finally felt alive. And then came the part that broke me. She talked about me, not directly, not by name, but it was unmistakable. "I live with someone who thinks they know me," she wrote. "They see the quiet girl with books and blankets, soft sweaters, and safe smiles. They think they know what I care about, what I dream of. But they have no idea who I really am. They don't ask, they don't want to know, they wouldn't understand." Those words pierced through me like a needle. I had always believed I was her closest person, the one who had her back no matter what, the one who knew her best. We'd grown up together, shared cereal boxes and late-night fears, made blanket forts in the living room, and confided in each other during the worst storms. I thought I knew every shade of who she was, but in her eyes, I was just another outsider, another face in the background of her carefully curated silence. I felt the air go out of the room. My stomach tightened into a knot I couldn't untangle. Shame and confusion crashed over me in waves. Had I really never asked her who she was beneath the version I liked? Had I mistaken closeness for connection? Familiarity for understanding? Suddenly, our shared life felt like a performance I hadn't known I was part of. Every movie night, every conversation over coffee, every shared silence in the car, I questioned all of it. Was she just going through the motions while dreaming of escape? Was I so caught up in my own assumptions that I never noticed she was drifting further away? I replayed so many small moments in my head, looking for signs I'd missed, clues she might have left. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the thread. Dozens of responses had appeared since she posted it. Strangers were opening their hearts to her, telling her that her words made them feel seen, understood, even liberated. Some thanked her for articulating the ache they carried for years but could never put into words. And she responded to them, not with vague comfort, but with piercing clarity. Her empathy was sharp, her insight disarming. She wasn't just talking, she was healing, guiding, leading. She was baring her soul to people who knew only fragments of her, and yet they seemed to understand her better than I ever had. That was the part that stung the most. They embraced her complexity without judgment, while I had only ever tried to keep her in the safe little box I'd built in my head. A place where she was always fine, always manageable. It was a strange kind of heartbreak. I wasn't angry at her, I was angry at myself. For not looking closer, for not asking better questions, for assuming that silence meant peace. She had always been there, just a few steps away, and somehow I'd missed her entirely. In that moment, I saw my sister not as the soft-spoken girl I thought I knew, but as a woman holding multitudes. Someone filled with contradictions, with fears and fantasies and strength she never felt safe enough to show. She wasn't hiding a secret life out of guilt or shame. She was building a version of herself she could finally breathe inside, a version she controlled, a version that wasn't filtered through someone else's expectations. And maybe she hadn't told me because I never gave her a reason to believe I wanted to know. Maybe I never asked the right questions. Maybe I was just too afraid to see what the answers might be. And now, sitting there, with the truth burning in my chest, I had to face the hardest question of all. What do I do with this knowledge? Do I confront her? Do I confess that I've seen behind the curtain? That I know her in a way I was never supposed to? Or do I carry this quietly, letting her be the one to decide if and when I'm allowed in? I wasn't ready to answer any of that yet. All I knew was that something had shifted between us, something irreversible. The mask was off, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't seeing the version of Emily that smiled politely at dinner or nodded during small talk. I was seeing the real Emily, and she was more than I'd ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and the occasional creak of the old floorboards, the only sounds breaking the silence. My mind replayed everything I had read, every word she had written, over and over. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't unsee it. And no matter how I tried to rationalize my way out, the truth was clear. I had crossed a line. I had stepped into a space that wasn't mine, and now I had to face whatever came next. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I brewed coffee, set out 2 mugs like always, and waited for Emily to wake up. The scent of freshly ground beans filled the air, and I focused on it, hoping it would ground me somehow. When she walked into the kitchen, barefoot and wrapped in her usual oversized cardigan, her hair slightly tousled and eyes still soft with sleep, I saw her differently. Not because she looked different, she didn't, but because I now knew what lived beneath the surface. Her silence, her habits, the small routines, I had always thought they were just quirks. But now I saw them as armor. I watched her laugh at something on her phone, pour her coffee, and hum quietly to a song playing on the radio. She looked content, peaceful. And for a moment, I considered saying nothing, letting her keep her world untouched, pretending I hadn't trespassed. But the weight of what I knew and how I knew it pressed down on me like lead. I couldn't lie, not anymore, not to her and not to myself. "Emily," I said quietly, my voice barely rising above the hum of the kitchen. She looked up. "Yeah?" I hesitated, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. "I saw something on your laptop last night." There was a pause. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, then something else, something sharper, fear. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth, the coffee mug trembling slightly in her fingers. "You? What did you see?" I took a breath, long and slow. "Velvet Haven, your posts, that thread you wrote, behind the mirror." The color drained from her face. She set the mug down on the counter with a soft clink, her hands now gripping the edge for support. "You read that? All of it?" I nodded, guilt washing over me in another heavy wave. She sat down slowly at the table, as if the air had suddenly become too dense to stand in. "I can't believe you." Her voice cracked, then softened, breaking around the edges. "Why would you do that?" I couldn't look at her. Because I was curious. Because I noticed things were different. Because I was worried. And I guess because I wanted to understand you better. Tears welled in her eyes, shining and fragile, but she blinked them away before they could fall. "That wasn't for you," she said. That was the one place I didn't have to explain myself. The one place where I could be me, without having to apologize for it. "I know," I said, my voice low. "And I'm sorry. I invaded your privacy. I broke your trust. But I also realized I don't really know you, not the way I thought I did, and that hurt more than I expected." Silence fell between us, thick and aching, like fog settling into a valley. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, two people who had shared everything and nothing at the same time. Finally, Emily spoke. Her voice was calm but weary. "I never told you because I didn't think you'd accept that version of me. The version that isn't soft or safe or simple. The one that questions everything. And sometimes feels like too much." I looked her in the eyes. "I'm still here, aren't I? I'm not running. I just want to know the real you. Even if it's messy, especially if it's messy." That's when the walls between us began to shift. Not crumble, not collapse, just move. Slowly. Just enough for us to see each other more clearly without the filters we'd used for so long. We talked for hours that day. About the things she kept hidden. About the versions of ourselves we show the world and the ones we don't even dare to admit to ourselves. We talked about the masks we wear, even with the people we love most, and how exhausting it is to maintain them. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean or graceful, but it was honest. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were starting to speak the same language. We cried, we laughed, awkwardly at first, then genuinely. We circled around pain and drifted back toward trust, cautiously, like testing ice on a frozen lake. And in those fragile, imperfect hours, something changed, something opened. Rebuilding trust takes time, forgiveness even longer. But something had begun that morning, not just a reckoning, but a rebuilding, one truth at a time, one cracked wall at a time, one tentative step closer to each other. And though we weren't anywhere close to being whole, we were no longer pretending. We were finally beginning to understand who we were, separately and together. And that somehow felt like a beginning. Healing didn't happen overnight. It didn't arrive in some dramatic gesture or grand revelation. There was no cinematic moment of resolution. No perfectly timed hug with sweeping music in the background. It came slowly, quietly. It arrived in fragments, in awkward pauses, in long walks and late night talks that meandered through guilt, confusion, and the complicated terrain of rebuilding something you thought had broken for good. It was a process, a slow, quiet unfolding, a patchwork of moments stitched together by patience, honesty, and the kind of effort we hadn't made before. There were awkward silences, yes, missteps, days when we avoided eye contact, when conversations ended too quickly or not at all, days when the trust we were trying to rebuild felt paper thin. But there were also moments that surprised us: unguarded laughter over burnt toast, the comfort of shared silence on the couch, texts that said, "thinking of you," when we didn't know what else to say. One of the first things Emily said after our talk stuck with me: "I don't want to live in two worlds anymore." And I believed her. Not because she said it perfectly or because she looked confident when she said it. She didn't. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled slightly around her mug. But there was something raw in her eyes, something sincere. She didn't mean she was giving up Velvet Haven or turning her back on the online community that had helped her find herself. She meant she was done compartmentalizing. She wanted to be whole. She wanted the same version of herself to exist in every space she occupied, online, offline, with strangers, with me. No more masks, no more shrinking to fit, no more quietly disappearing behind the safety of anonymity. And I respected that more than I can explain. It wasn't easy. There were moments where I said the wrong thing, moments where I didn't know how to show up for her, times when I still felt like an outsider in her world, unsure of my place. But I learned something invaluable through those uncomfortable spaces: the importance of showing up anyway, of sitting in silence when words felt too heavy, of choosing presence over perfection. I stopped trying to fix her or us. I stopped trying to mold our relationship into what it had been before. Instead, I started listening, not just to the words she said, but to the ones she didn't. The hesitation in her voice, the way her fingers fidgeted when she was unsure. I began to pay attention, not to solve, but to understand. Emily, in turn, started to let me in. Not all at once, but little by little. She began sharing pieces of her world: the stories she wrote, the posts she was proud of, the anonymous threads where she helped strangers feel less alone. At first, she was hesitant, watching me like I might flinch or laugh or judge, but I didn't. I read every word, I asked questions, I told her the truth. Her writing was beautiful, her insight was startling. Her presence in that online space was something rare and important. Watching her come alive in a place I had once trespassed through was humbling. But this time, I wasn't a trespasser. I was being invited in, welcomed, trusted, and that meant everything. Our relationship didn't return to what it was. And now, I'm glad it didn't. What we have now is different, more fragile in some ways, but stronger where it matters. It's rooted in truth, in transparency, in the decision to show up as we are, not as who we think we're supposed to be. I've learned that privacy is sacred, that we all need places to retreat, to be ourselves without fear. But I've also learned that connection is sacred too, and that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that bring us closest. It's not about knowing every secret, it's about being someone a person can trust with their truth when they're ready to share it. If you've ever felt like someone you love is hiding behind a version of themselves, don't pry, invite. Don't assume, ask. Don't pressure, listen. Don't walk away, stay. Sometimes the door doesn't open because we're knocking too loudly. Sometimes it opens when we simply sit outside and wait, showing we're still there. Emily and I still have a long way to go. We still have unspoken things and old habits that sneak in. But we're walking the same path now, not perfectly, not quickly, but together. And that, more than anything, is what matters. Now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have opened the laptop? Would you have told your sister or kept it to yourself? Have you ever discovered a side of someone you thought you knew, and did it bring you closer or tear you apart? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading. And thanks for sticking with me through this story.